Okay, friends, here we are, talking about the Book of Enoch. Lots of people are talking about it. It's fairly well known in the Flat Earth community. I've known about it for a long time based on the association it has with the Nephilim and the fringes, you might say, of Christianity. But since the Flat Earth came up, it's been being heralded as the next best thing. I never have really cared for the Book of Enoch, even back 10 or 12 years ago when I first came across it. Mainly it was trumpeted for the chapters that it has relevant to the story of Genesis 6, which was expanded as it has been in other texts as well. But anyway, so here we go. There are actually 3 different books of Enoch, not just one. There is the so-called second Enoch, which is the Slavonic or Greek Enoch, which talks about him traveling to the 7 heavens. There is the so-called third Enoch, which is Hebrew, which has Enoch being transformed into the angel Metatron. But nobody really cares about those 2. The main one is the first Book of Enoch, so-called, or just the Book of Enoch. James Bruce brought back some Ethiopic copies in the Ethiopian language, which is right here. This is the Book of Enoch in the Ethiopic, like an Ethiopic Bible. The Book of Enoch was never put into any of the Bibles except in the Ethiopic church. It was not in the Coptic church, not in any other church. Not the Orthodox, not the Catholic, certainly not the Protestant. It was never in the Bible, except in Ethiopian. So this is the Ethiopic script. It's actually a very complicated language. It has 210 letters. It's a syllabic with an individual symbol for each syllable. You have a certain number of consonants and a certain number of vowels, sounds, and every combination of which has its own unique symbol. So you have over 200 individual letters in the Ethiopian language. Anyway, so James Bruce brought back the copies, the first copies, from Abyssinia in 1773. The first English translation was made in 1821 by Richard Lawrence, but nobody knows about him because really the only person you need to know about is good Mr. R.H. Charles here, who basically he made the definitive version of it. I had the 1912 edition, well, the version. He made 2 of them, I think. One of them he made one version that actually had like an Ethiopic section where it was talking about, it had notes on the translation and the various intricacies of the language. But I didn't have that one. I had the regular version that is shown here. Anyhow, the book was venerated in Judea before it was in the Ethiopic tradition. Its origins come from Judea. Was known as the Qumran sect, or the Essenes. which had separated itself from what at the time was considered normal Judaism, also known as Second Temple Judaism, because they saw that as being erroneous, divergent from the original, the truth, in the First Temple era. So we're talking about 250 BC or so forward. The book does not predate that. That is when it was written. It's written in several different parts. Over the course of 300 years, it was written by multiple people in 5 or 6 sections. The first of which concerned the Watchers, the fallen angels or demons, which is what was originally venerated about the book in modern times in the outskirts of Christianity, who cared about such things. The first 36 chapters are this first section, which is really the first book of Enoch. Again, written about 250 BC. It's an expansion on Genesis 6, like I said. The second part is a book of astronomy, which is what I always cared about more. This is the part that I cared about the most, was the section on astronomy, written about 200 BC or so. It was an attempt to reform the Hebrew calendar from a lunar calendar, which requires intercalation, solar intercalation, to keep track of the seasons, to a solar calendar. That is what the second part of the Book of Enoch was about. Now, the third part was a series of visions of, supposedly, of Enoch from about 160 BC, 150 BC, somewhere through there. This is a retelling of Israel's history from creation down to the Maccabean period, supposedly as a prophecy, but of course it only actually shows when it was written during the Maccabean time frame, which is what this picture here shows. Obviously the Maccabean revolt was against Antiochus, who basically, because he had profaned the temple, which is shown there with the ark and the menorah, Antiochus sacrificed a pig, which is an unclean animal, which basically is defiling or profaning the temple. And he put up a Christmas tree, which is a veneration of the god Ashtaroth, in the temple, replacing the Ark of the Covenant. Was not there at the time, it had already been removed. In its place, they put up a Christmas tree, venerating basically the female deity, Ishtar, Venus, any of the various names. At that time and location, it was called Ashtaroth. It's basically the Venus equivalent, and it's a Christmas tree, and so they put it up. And Hanukkah comes from them rededicating the temple, clearing it out, taking down the tree, and rededicating it or re-sanctifying the temple. That's what Hanukkah is all about. It's the opposite of Christmas. Anyway, then there's the fourth part of the book, which is the so-called prophecy of Enoch, which is standard apocalyptic sounding literature, mostly borrowing from previously written Old Testament books such as Ezekiel. And the fifth part of the book, which is actually chapters 37 to 71, it's in the middle of the book, but it's the last part that was written, and was later, they were later compiled together in one text. But 37 to 71 was the last part written, and is so-called the Book of Parables. It's written after 50 AD, which is why it was actually, this section was omitted from the Qumran copies. They did not even have this book because their copies were written before this section existed, so it wasn't even there at the time. Anyhow, moving on. Now, Enoch is said to have lived for 365 years. You count it down from Adam. You see the numbers here, the dates of the lives. Here's Enoch highlighted, 365, born 3382 BC. Was taken by God in 3017 BC. So if he's going to write a book of any kind, it has to be within the time frame of his lifetime, which is before the flood, 700 years before the flood, which happened around 2348 BC. And you have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob down here at 1749 BC, just for reference. Enoch lived a long time ago, and it wasn't 200 BC. Alright, I make a point of this because in 3000 or 3300, if Enoch is born 3382 BC, he's going to be writing from 3300 to 3000 BC. And during that time, in 3000 BC, this was the writing that they had. It wasn't even cuneiform yet. It was still pictographic, Sumerian. Cuneiform wasn't developed until 2500 BC. It became more stylized as time went on, you see. This here is a picture of an early Sumerian style cuneiform, whereas this is later Babylonian style cuneiform, Akkadian. You can see the difference. They are made on tablets, full-size tablets. This one here is the Tablet 11 of Gilgamesh, which is the flood story of Noah that predates, it does not predate the flood from the Bible. That's a misconception. Of course, obviously, it predates the flood story, because the flood story wasn't written until, 1200 BC or whatever. Well, these tablets go back, the story, it's not the point that it predates it, it's that Gilgamesh, the time frame of Gilgamesh, 2800 BC, predates the flood. The flood of 2348. So the fact that they're equating it with Gilgamesh means that the flood story, according to those legends, the Babylonian legends, the flood actually predates the narration of the time frame of the Bible itself, you see, which is calling into question biblical chronology. So anyway, my point is, if Enoch is going to be writing a book of any kind, it's not even going to be cuneiform. It's going to be pictographs, which would be copied into early cuneiform and then into later Babylonian, Akkadian cuneiform, and so on. It's not going to just spontaneously appear at 100 BC in Aramaic. Alright. Here we have a cartoon picture of what's supposed to represent God, the Creator. Above him we have the word Logos, because the Logos, as John said, is what God used to create the universe, create all things. It comes from the Logos, which is the Greek word for words. The words or the speech of God, which is to say the vibration. I take the Logos is representing Christ in the Gospel, right? But John is equating it to the very beginning. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." John says, "Without the Word was not anything made that was made. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Without him was not anything made that was made. He's equating Christ to the Word and the Word to the light. So he's saying basically that Christ is the person that created all things through the light. He's starting off his gospel the same way that Genesis starts off. It's equating Christ with the creator being. So I tried to find a picture, if I could, of this word, this light, this original point of light, just to represent the idea of a point of creation and the Logos. The universe is made of a fractal nature, a fractal design, which is to say it is infinitely complex. On one level, everything represents everything else. Everything is a mirror of everything else. It's a microcosm. If you know anything about fractals, especially how the universe is made, it has to do with sacred geometry, it has to do with mathematics. Fractals are very complex mathematical forms. You can look them up and you'll see what I mean. Anyway, so just to have an idea of space that is created, I looked up some galaxies here. There's one picture, I believe that's of Andromeda through infrared. The heat signature. And the other one there on the left is called the Crown of Thorns. I found it very interesting that there is a Crown of Thorns galaxy that I came across while I was looking up images of the universe and the Word. Now I know a lot of people don't believe in galaxies or really anything in space. I don't believe that it's what they say it is, but neither do I believe they're lying about everything that they say, such as the Milky Way. Whatever it is in the sky. You can't deny it. It is part of the night sky and the stars, and it was part of the ancient world's cosmological view. They deified the stars, they deified the planets, they made up mythological stories about the constellations, being heroes, being gods, doing this, doing that, in the ancient primordial world, and then when they died they became immortalized in the stars. The Milky Way, which comes from the Latin Via Lactea, was known throughout all of the ancient world, and was venerated for different things at different times for different reasons, including the Maya, who used it as the phrase. They called it the white road, and they thought when you died your soul entered the heavens. The idea of heaven is the heavens, and your soul goes off into the cosmos. And they say for the Mayan phrase for someone dying was to say he entered the road, which is a reference to the Milky Way or the White Road. The probes here, Kobe, the W map, and the Planck, mapping out the background radiation of the universe, ended up showing the cosmos to be geocentric, which is to say 360 degrees around the Earth in every direction equidistant. Very interesting. And here we have a projection of the entire night sky, even though it is skewed to the perspective of the equator of the Milky Way and not the equator or the ecliptic of the Earth. It is still the same concept of the geocentric model being projected here on this shell of the cosmos. I find it to be a nice projection of the whole thing, even though it's kind of hard to see it's hard to tell what you're looking at, because you're basically seeing the entire sky as one flat surface, much the same as a map would be, a projection of a map of the same shape. The mole-wide. If you look up the mole-wide map projection, it's pretty much the same projection as this is of the night sky. Okay. Early on, there was this picture here is actually from the Zohar, which is a book. It's part of the Kabbalah, but I'm using it here because it actually shows something very simple. This is from the 1200s, and it was used to explain the day-night cycle, saying that the Earth actually rotates, even though they have it on its side. And it was saying that it was actually considering down to be night and up to be day. But the concept is still there that the Earth spins. It stated that the entire Earth turned as a sphere, that when one part is up, the other part is down. When one part is light, the other part is dark. That's from the 1200s. And the source that was cited was supposedly from the 3rd century, from a rabbi named Hamnuna. Of course, it's very much like the modern geocentric model, which is shown here. This was hundreds of years before Copernicus. That's why I'm making the note of it, because I'm saying that this idea was not. This idea is more ancient than people want to give it credit for. It was around. And here we have the planets in the night sky. And the 5 planets plus the sun and the moon make the 7 planets. These were the 7 spheres, or the 7 heavens, of the ancient cosmological model. This is where all myth comes from. Back to the fallen angels, or the Watchers, which used to be the main part of the Book of Enoch, the part that everybody cared about. 10 years ago, nobody cared about the astronomical aspect of it. But Enoch says that there were 200 Watchers, but they are nothing more than the 300 Igigi of the old Sumerian list of Watchers, who were basically the servants of the 7 Anunnaki. Now, there were 7 Anunnaki originally, of course, because again there were 7 planets. In the Atrahasis story, the Igigi worked for the Anunnaki. The Sumerian for Igigi is actually Nungalene, or the Great Sovereigns. Of course, the Anunnaki themselves, Sitchin will tell you that Anunnaki means those who came from heaven to earth, which is where you would get fallen from. But Anunnaki actually means people of the princely blood, or prince's blood. So it's talking about a royal lineage, a royal bloodline. And the Igigi are their stewards, their attendants, their entourage, whatever. They're the people that work for them in their personal lives. It's basically what it is. But anyway, so the Igigi, or Watchers, became known as the Watchers later on. The idea of the fallen, so on and so forth, all the way down to the time of the writing of the Book of Enoch, in which he has the 200 Watchers and their 20 leaders. You have Semyaza, Arachiel, Ramiel, Kokabiel, Tamael, Ramiel, Daniel, Jezakiel, Barakiel, Aziel, Batariel, Bazaliel, Analiel, Ezekiel, Shamsiel, Satariel, Turiel, Yomiel, Sariel, and Amaros. Each one of these dudes was supposedly responsible for bringing one type of witchcraft, one type of evil or another, and giving them to mankind as the benefactors, teaching them the knowledge of good and evil, you might say. Now, Enoch is said to have made intercession for Azazel. This is impossible. You cannot make intercession for Azazel because it's in the book of Leviticus. Azazel is necessary as the scapegoat for the atonement. Azazel is required by law, by the Torah, for the atonement for God's people, which means he's therefore necessary for the redemption, just as Judas was necessary as the Azazel scapegoat for Christ. Christ was the goat for Yahweh. In the atonement sacrifice, there was always two goats, not one. You would have one goat for Yahweh, one goat for Azazel. The Azazel goat would be cursed with all of the sin of the land of Israel, the people of Israel. The atonement goat, the goat for Yahweh, would be killed and the blood thrown onto the Ark of the Covenant, the Kaparith on top of the Ark. All of these things were necessary. The Azazel goat was cursed and taken outside the city and killed in the desert. This is why Judas was killed. They say they would throw them off a cliff, something like that. When you read about Judas, it says that he was actually thrown off a cliff as well. So that's how you know Judas was the scapegoat for Christians. Judas took on our sin, not Christ. Anyone that tells you Christ took our sin doesn't know what they're talking about. Then you have Enoch's journeys through the earth and Sheol, which is taken from Enoch or Ishtar's descent into the underworld. Same as when you have Christ going into hell for 3 days. Comes from Enoch's descent or Ishtar's descent through the 7 gates, which are the 7 planets. And this became the 7 angels and everything else. The 7 planets are the 7 gates to the underworld and to the afterlife. So like I said, all the mythology from the ancient world came from the skies, the heavens, the planets, the zodiac, all of these things. And the 20 names and functions of the 7 of the archangels. This is kind of funny to me that people would even associate the archangels with these planets, but there are 7 archangels because there are 7 planets. That's why there's 7 days. Everything else, all the 7s come from the 7 planets. He talks about the 7 mountains in the north with the tree of life. He talks about the fire that deals with the luminaries of heaven. He talks about Sheol in the underworld. He talks about the punishment of the fallen angels. Now see, the fallen angels. Let me tell you where the fallen angels come. The idea comes from the planets, because you have the stars, which are they're the messengers of God, the stars of the heavens. God is in control of the heavens. The stars are his angels. Okay, and they are fixed in the sphere of the primum mobile. Everything else, planets, asteroids, comets, meteors, whatever, can be seen in space, and UFOs, whatever can be seen, flying around or in space, is seen as being a fallen angel, someone who's going against the ordered arrangement of God's plan, God's divine cosmos. If it's cutting against the night sky, it's going against his plan, his order. So it's seen as being fallen, because it's going its own way. And so he's talking about the fallen angels, but those actually are the planets. And when he's said to have gone to the 7 heavens, being taken up into heaven and going to the 7 heavens one by one, and is given a description of each one, he's actually talking about going to the sun, going to the moon. That's the first heaven. You go to the next heaven is Mercury, the next heaven is Venus, the next heaven is the sun. And then you go to Mars, then you go to Jupiter, then you go to Venus. Those are your 7 heavens. Not Venus, Saturn. Saturn is the 7th heaven. when you read about him going to these different places and talking to the demons, talking to the angels or the fallen angels or whatever, you're reading about him actually going and saying that he is stepping foot on Venus, on Mercury, on Mars, on the sun, and talking to people there. And it's the same in, if you read Dante's Divine Comedy, he goes to the levels of hell, then he goes through purgatory, and then at the end, the third part, he goes through the levels of heaven, which are the planetary spheres. And he goes through them one by one, just like Enoch is said to have done. So you have the 7 mountains that he talks about, that are the 7 planets, and he has the river of light, which again I say is most likely the Milky Way. And so the angels revolted against God. They came down, they mated with women, they produced a race of being called the Nephilim, or the Enochian. The Anak, or giants. Anakim is plural, which is interesting to me. The word Anakim is very similar to the word Anunnaki. And if you know anything about Star Wars, you know that Darth Vader was originally called Anakin Skywalker. And when Qui-Gon asked his mother who the father was, she said he had no father. And so the idea is that the Force itself produced him for her to give birth to. Obviously, this is a reference to Christ being born of the Spirit, which means that Anakin, who is a Nephilim, represents Christ in the Star Wars movies, which means he turns into Vader, so that Vader represents Christ in the Star Wars movies. Vader comes from the Hebrew word Ve'adar, which is a certain month. I mentioned before that the Hebrew calendar was intercalary, based on the moon, which means most of the time the calendar had 12 months out of the year, and the final month was called Adar. But in the intercalary years, where they actually add in a 13th month. The 13th month is called the double Adar, which in Hebrew is Ve-Adar, or Vader, which some say is the month in which Christ was born. And so that's my take on the name, anyway, of Anakin and Vader. Anyhow, getting back to these fallen angels, like I said, there were 20 chief angels or leaders. The chief of which I would say, even though it's named as Shemyaza, I would say the chief would be Azazel, for the reasons I mentioned before. Azazel was said to have taught men to make swords and knives and shields, basically the weapons of war, and how to kill people. So Azazel became, in Enoch's mind, became your war god, which would be Mars, right? Shemyaza and Amaros taught people how to make enchantments, and taught them about herbs and things like that. Shamsiel and Sariel taught men, he says, about the courses of the sun and the moon, which is odd because in the other book later, part 2, that was written by somebody else later on, of course Enoch, having gone to the heavens, then comes back and decides to write a book about these very topics that he just got through saying were given to us by the demon. Funny how that works, you see. Barakiel and Kokabiel taught them about the constellations and astrology. Again, that's kind of strange. Ezekiel is supposedly the one that taught them about clouds and the weather. Arachiel, the signs of the earth, when to plant, when to harvest, basically farming and husbandry. Believe it or not, you have other demons teaching such fine arts, such as Gadriel, teaching the art of cosmetics and of how to make bracelets and amulets, charms, basically jewelry, and how to make stones, gemstones, all of that type of thing. But notice he's equating jewelry and cosmetics with amulets and witchcraft. So the idea in the ancient world, such as in Egypt, of painting the face was actually seen as being part of the magical practice. The same as somebody wearing an amulet or a charm. Even nowadays, they have charm bracelets and things like that. If you trace it back far enough, all the jewelry goes back to talismans and superstition and articles of witchcraft and occultism. So basically everything that he is naming, he is saying, comes from the demons. All different types of knowledge, all different types of everything that's not seen as being natural. Okay, getting to these pictures. I typed in fallen angel, got a few pictures of depictions here to use. This is supposedly them meeting together when they decide to rebel against God. They make a pact amongst themselves. Here is when they are cast out from heaven. Here is a statue of a damn fallen angel. Here is the fallen angels in pop culture. Supernatural deals with it. The show Supernatural, which has a lot of seasons. I forget how many, it's like 10 or something. I remember the movie Fallen. The Supernatural, by the way, actually has a character called Azazel, which is why I put him here, because his name came up a lot. The movie Fallen, I remember back in the 90s, watching it. It was about the angel Azazel. I remember because they mispronounced the name as Azazel. Anyway, it's about a demon that jumps from body to body, and as such cannot be killed. I also found that Azazel is one of the damn X-Men characters who can jump dimensions and has come to Earth. He's trapped in another dimension, but he can come to Earth for short periods of time. And he uses that time to impregnate women to have children who he will then use, because they are here permanently, to help try to get him out of his own dimension that he's stuck in. He's locked in his dimension away from Earth, but he's trying to get back in by creating a sort of a bloodline or seed lineage through women on Earth to breach a way to punch a hole back into this dimension so he can come and stay. That's actually in the X-Men comic books. Unbelievable. Anyway, our idea of angels and demons basically comes from the Nordic cosmology. The idea of Valkyries. Why are all the angels that we think of in the modern day female, when all the angels in the Bible and Kabbalistic lore and rabbinic lore, all the angels are always male in the ancient world? They didn't have any female angels. Now all the angels are women. It's because they got the idea in the Renaissance from the Nordic Valkyries. And all of these gods, the Nordic gods, the Germanic gods, Odin, Thor, Balder. Balder is the Nordic version of Baal, or Baal. You know, you have the different gods. You have Thor as there's like the sky god of thunder and rain. Odin is your Mercury character with your all-seeing eye. You can actually see Odin here only has one eye, because he is said to have given up one of his eyes to be able to see the future. And he created the runes as a divination tool to use for that practice. So there again, that goes back to your Eye of Horus and all of that. But keep in mind, Odin is the Mercury character. Mercury is the god of, he's the messenger of the god, he's the god of wisdom, the god of knowledge. Hermes. Anyway, so then you keep going back, you have all of your Greek gods coming from, it's interesting to note, all the Greek gods spawn from chaos, the void, primarily Gaia, which is the earth. You have all these gods, you have Uranus, which is heaven, from which we get the word Uranus. Uranus is Latin, the Greek was Uranus. You have all these different gods. Here is Helios, the god of the sun, Selene, the god of the moon, and Eos, the goddess of the dawn. Just two general depictions. Here's Zeus, Hades. Here's Hermes here, Athena. I've heard it said by people that the Titans, or the Olympians of the Greek myth, were the fallen angels, were the Nephilim. But I don't entirely agree with this. I see where they're coming from, and they're partially right, but by the time you get down to the Greek world, you've already had 2,000 and 3,000 years of obfuscation. And people retelling stories and making up new stories and new myths, and people compiling different myths and merging them together, and it becomes very, very convoluted after 3,000 years of storytelling. And so you end up with the Greek gods, from which basically we get the planets' names. Okay, Uranus was the father of the gods. He's a primordial deity, and I have a personal theory of mine. If you want to say, if you believe that the Bible is true, and that the lineage is true, and Enoch was real, and all the patriarchs were real, it's my personal opinion that a lot of these gods, in their original form, were basically just deifications of the antediluvial patriarchs in the Bible. Adam, Seth, Abel, Lamech, Methuselah, Enoch, Noah, Shem. Okay. So you have Uranus as the father of the gods. And if you're going to make the association with patriarchs and the gods, then he would be Adam. Uranus, I'm equating with Adam. Alright, then you have the next god, Kronos, or Saturn, is a Titan, who is after the primordial gods, but before the Olympians. Saturn would come from the name Set. The Egyptian name Set, there's a god in Egypt called Set. He's the evil god. This comes, I believe, from the name Seth, Adam's third son, named Seth. He took over the Melchizedek lineage after Abel was killed. And from him all the others came. All of these guys, Adam, Seth, Enoch, Noah, Shem, they're all Melchizedeks, okay? Which are priests of God. They were basically the kings of the earth at the time, before Babylon was set up. Before Nimrod. The kings were the Melchizedeks. So Adam was the first king. He was the father of all. Okay. Then you go down to Shem, Noah's son. This is after the flood. You had the god named, or the Melchizedek. You had Adam's son named Seth. Took over after Abel. Apparently, the name Seth was turned into Set in Egypt, and he became an evil god because he killed Osiris. Now, Osiris was actually that's the Greek version, the Hellenized version of Asur. In Egyptian, the god was named Asur. Okay, Asur was the same as the Assyrian Ashur. The Assyrian Empire, the Assyrian kingdom, was named after its founder, Ashur. Now, it's obvious to me that Ashur was Nimrod. It became deified as Jupiter or Zeus, and in Egypt as Osiris. Okay, now you have the evil god Set, or Seth, kill Osiris, Ashur, or Nimrod, and cut his body up, and send the pieces to the different cities, the 7 cities. In Babylonian, the story says that there were 7 parts that he sent to the 7 cities. In the Egyptian model, there were, I think, 14 pieces. Anyway, what I'm saying is, Nimrod was actually Shem's brother's grandson, according to the Bible story. And so, the guy that killed Nimrod for proclaiming himself to be God on earth was actually Shem, who was the Melchizedek king at the time, priest of God and king of earth. He was the Melchizedek after the flood. And so Shem is actually equated with Saturn or Set. From the word Set, the Hebrew gets the word Satan. And from that you get Saturn. Also you get satire. But the Greeks had what they called satires. And the satires were actually half goat, half people. And that's where you get the idea of the devil with the horns and the hooves and the tail. If you look up the Greek god Pan, P-A-N, you will see what I mean. Anyway, like I just said, Zeus, Jupiter, is actually Ashur Nimrod, deified, as also is the constellation Orion. Hermes, or Mercury, like I said, this is the god of wisdom, the god of knowledge. This is the deification of Enoch. Also, in Egypt, the god Hermes was actually Thoth, who created, supposedly, languages, created writing. Then you have Ares or Mars. And now, a war god is not exactly, you don't need a person to deify to have a war god. But if you're going to have one, I imagine it would be a great conqueror. And if you look into actual history, Nimrod is debatable as to who that actually is. Ashur, you can look around and see who you think Nimrod actually was. There are different names that could apply. But if you want to look up to find the first great conqueror of the known world, Sargon of Akkad was the first. And so if you're gonna make now this guy was about 2300 BC, Sargon of Akkad. Now I just said before that the flood happened about 2350 BC. So that's right about the same. That's right about the right time frame for this Nimrod character. But anyway, so Sargon was the great conqueror of the Akkadian time frame, the Akkadian world. Okay, and then you have Apollo. Now, Apollo is actually Latin. The Greek is Apollyon. That's spoken of in Revelation as the demon, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, which I believe to be a portal to a different dimension, the demonic dimension. He actually is a general that leads an army of demons into this world to conquer it. John identifies the leader of this army of demons as being Apollyon. Now, Apollo is actually a very complex god, and is not directly the sun. It has been associated with the sun god, but the sun god in Greek was actually Helios, like I just said a minute ago, and in Latin was Sol. So Apollyon and Apollo is different, but it does have aspects of the sun. Now, you have Shem's brother Ham. broke away after the flood. Noah made Shem the Melchizedek. Ham was the firstborn, the older brother. And he wanted the priesthood for himself. He wanted to be the Melchizedek himself, or king of the world. So he goes off and he makes Babylon. And he proclaims himself to be the king, which is what it says in the Bible when he says, let us make us our own name. Let us make us our own authority. Let us make us our own priesthood. And so he calls himself Shem. And makes a new priesthood there, which is the beginning of the mystery religion, is the sun god Shamash. In Babylonian, the word is Shamash. In Hebrew, it's Shem. So he called himself Shem or Shamash, and that became the sun god, and that began the mystery religions and the cult of the sun worship. Alright, next, then you have Poseidon or Neptune, which is obviously the sea god, which means that's going to be Noah, the deification of Noah, which in Sumerian was called Ziusudra. And then you have Hades or Pluto, it's the god of the underworld. Again, that you don't need a person to be deified as such to have a god of the mythological supposed underworld. The underworld is where the stars went when they set. They did not see it, and in the ancient world they had the flat earth model. They did not see it as a sphere of stars. I mean, they did see it as a sphere of stars, but they did not see it as a sphere of earth. They saw it as a flat plane, but a sphere of stars that moved over it, and the sun rising and setting. Okay, and when the sun set, they said that it went into the underworld. In the night, it was under the earth. And then it came up in the morning on the side, it came out of the underworld back into the overworld. And so the idea of the underworld, or Hades, comes from the very concept of the flat earth. And what's under the flat earth? Where does the sun go? It goes under the earth, into the underworld. You don't need a person to deify for that, because it was part of their cosmological model. Aphrodite or Venus, obviously that's going to be Eve, whose name was Tiamat, or the giver of life, the mother of all. Then you have Artemis or Themis, also called Diana, Luna, Selene, many different names. This was your moon goddess. Again, it doesn't have to be a deification of a person for the moon. It was just associated with the women, with the menstrual cycle, 28 days. Even though, unbeknownst to them at the time in the ancient world, has been found recently, in the modern times, that not only does the moon spin on its axis 28 days, it goes around the earth in 28 days, but also the sun itself also has an axial rotation of 28 days. So is it the moon that's in sync with the cycle? Is it the sun that's in sync with the cycle? Is it both? If one of them causes it, which one? I suspect it's the sun and not the moon. But that's just me. These are all Olympians. The first two, Uranus is he's a primal god. You have Saturn or Kronos is a Titan. The rest of these are Olympians. And so you have Dionysus or Bacchus, who some people say Christ is and Moses are modeled after. You have Athena, who was the patron of Athens. Athens was named after Athena. And is also basically the patron of the United States of America. Hephaestus, or Vulcan, was the god of the forge, the developer, the god who fashions things, builds things. You have Hera, or Juno, was one, and Demeter/Ceres was one. Now, Juno and Ceres are minor planetary bodies in the solar system as well. As you keep going back further in time, back to the Egyptian time frame, you start to notice that their gods were depicted as having animal heads. The falcon Horus here. Anubis, the jackal-headed god. I believe this is Num with the crocodile head. No, that's not. That's I forget who this is right now with the horns. I should remember, but I forget. Anyway, this speaks to me of the hybridization and mixing of the bloodlines with animals and with demons, and the fallen angels were not having sex with people. They were splicing the DNA with people, with animals, with themselves, with everything, just like they're doing now, messing everything up by changing the DNA, deconstructing it. The whole point, the whole idea of this whole benevolent gods is erroneous. They did not create us. The idea that aliens made us is erroneous. They are demons, and what they did was they took what God had made and they took our DNA and they spliced it with basically with animals or chimps, apes, and they defiled our blood, and that is the fall of man. It is our blood. They did not make a super race by combining lower man with their own DNA, and they made, you know, Homo sapien. That's what the idea is. That's what Sitchin will tell you. That's what Daniken will tell you. Graham Hancock, all these guys. That dude on the Ancient Aliens show with the crazy hair. But that's wrong. They did not build us up from monkeys. They defiled what God had made with the monkeys. That's the fall of man. And you can see here, this is supposed to be Asher. This is the conquering hero of Assyria, who founded Babylon, founded Assyria. But here's the older picture of him as a damn eagle-headed god. The eagle god is actually a very ancient thing. It actually is older than the phoenix. It's the idea of the falcon, the idea of the eagle, the phoenix. These are very ancient concepts. The phoenix actually goes back to Phoenicia. The Phoenicians, who spread so much of this around through the ancient world, all through North Africa and Europe, through their sea trade networks. The Phoenicians were actually named after the phoenix. Well, if you look it up, they will actually say that it's named after the color purple, which is one of the most that was one of the most luxurious items in the ancient world, was purple-colored fabric, because it was so hard to make. It became so expensive that only kings and emperors and things like that could afford it. And so, if you look up actually the word in the Greek, the word phoenix actually does mean purple, but it also means this undying bird creature. If you keep going back, you go back to Babylon, you find this Ishtar woman, who, like I said, was a deification of Eve. But if you see here, she's already been spliced. Whoever this person actually is, it's a shape of a woman, but she has wings, and she has horns on her head, and she has some strange attributes on her legs, including her feet, which are talons, like some kind of a bird of prey. And of course, by her side are the two owls. And she has her hands up with the rings, and if you look to the side, this is an older depiction of the same thing. Now this is Sumerian. The Ishtar depiction here is Babylonian. But the other picture of this grotesque monster thing is Sumerian, the so-called god Pazuzu. And it's the same stance. If you notice, it has one arm up, she has both arms up. He appears to be grabbing something, even though it's not in his hand. She's grabbing onto the rings. If you notice, one arm is up and one arm is down. If you look up the Eliphas Levi picture of Baphomet, or the Washington, the actual statue of George Washington that's modeled after Baphomet, they both have one arm up and one arm down in this exact pose. And also you can see his feet are some kind of talons for the bird of prey creature that he's supposed to be. Anyway, what I'm saying is these gods change depiction over time. If you go back even further, they are even more animalistic, less human. You can see here this strange creature is supposed to be female. One has a baby there. The baby has a triangular head. They have strange elongated eyes. They have large noses, but they're not noses. These are not human faces. These are not human forms. Very wide shoulders, very prominent bone structure. Here's this helmet-looking thing here, which would fit over these strange heads. Here is a very reptilian-looking version of a male deity. These are the Ubaid culture. Sumer is 4000 BC. Okay? It goes all the way back to Adam, all the way back as far as you can go, basically, in the timeline. These things are made not by Sumerians, but you go back 5000 BC and more, 6000 BC. You find these things from what's called the Ubaid culture. These very strange figurines of their gods. What I'm saying is, the farther you go back in time, the more alien they appear. And only as you progress through the ages do they become anthropomorphized as humans and as the idealized perfect people. The whole idea of the Greek god with the perfect physical features. If you go back, you find their gods were not so beautiful. And this is where Sitchin comes in, saying that they're actually representing reptilian gods. I don't know that there are reptilian beings around, but I keep an open mind. And it's best to be prepared for things than to not be. And so you got to make your plans big enough for everything to fit in, you know what I mean? And so just keep these things in mind. Also, one more thing of note is this right here is a depiction of Shamash, which, as I said, would be Ham. Here again, he also has this ring in his hand. Here's a depiction of the sun, which depicts him, that shows that he is the sun god. He also has the horns on his head, which shows his authority. But here are these regular people, regular humans, approaching this god who is sitting down, and his legs are bigger than these people are. If he stood up, he would be 20 feet tall. So, this again, now we're talking about the Nephilim, we're talking about the giants. But this is Shamash, which I just said, the ancient gods were the deification of the antediluvial world. People from the antediluvial world. The actual gods, which were, in my mind, a lot of the ideas of the gods may have just been antediluvial people, and they just called them gods, like the Anunnaki, the people of the royal blood. After the flood, people started living much. If you go back to the chart I showed earlier, before the flood they were living 1,000 years, 800 years. After the flood, they lived 400 years, then 200, then 100. Their lifespan shortened after the flood. They grew shorter. But then again, also, the fall of man had to do with like I said, the de-evolution of mankind by splicing DNA with animals, which was reducing their physical power, their physical prowess, their mental acuity, their mental ability, making them more docile, more easy to control by reducing them in size, basically turning a wolf into a dog, or a lion into a house cat. They took something that was like a tiger or a jaguar, and they tried turning it into something like a bobcat or a lynx. It's a smaller version of itself. It's easier to maintain, easier to control. And also, you take a good, 50 or 80 points off their IQ, and they're also going to be a lot easier to control. And they won't be building pyramids anymore. Okay. And here is a depiction of the human body with the 7 major glands that produce the hormones of the body. With what is called the male and female gonads, testes or ovaries. The testes are really just descended ovaries. The Leiden, the adrenal gland, thyroid and thymus, the pituitary and the pineal gland. These 7 gland systems produce the hormones of the body. They are also equivalent to the 7 chakra systems, from the root chakra up to the sacral, solar plexus, the heart chakra, throat chakra, the so-called third eye of the pituitary, and the crown chakra of the pineal gland. This is something I picked up from Edgar Casey a long time ago. But the 7 chakras are associated with 7 colors, rising in frequency from red to purple. If you equate that, as I have done here in this chart, with the color spectrum, colors, you have the 7 colors are actually the same as the 7 notes. The 7, I believe it's the 49th octave, is the octave that we see with our eye. We see 1 octave of light, which is red to purple, 7 colors. We hear 7 notes, but we hear many octaves, so they repeat. They just rise in frequency, rise in pitch. The actual chromatic scale, which is a division of the octave into 12 notes, is as shown here, and it equates to the colors as shown here, which equate to all the other colors. And everything that has 7 or 12 is basically also arranged as such. So that the light that we see is actually 30 and 40 octaves higher than the frequencies that we hear, but they are the same frequencies. If we could actually hear them, we would hear the same notes. If we could see the colors of what we can hear, then we would see the same colors at that range. It just repeats. After you go through purple and it cycles back again to the next octave, it becomes red again. Just like when you go through the octave and you reach the top at F sharp, you go to the next note, it goes back to G again, because the frequencies of each octave are double. A G, say A is 440. It's commonly known that A is 440 after the so-called international standard was supposed to be 432 instead of 440. The 432 is natural, but they made it 440 in lots of different countries. If you double that, you get to the next A. The next octave is 880. That's the amount of frequencies, vibrations per second, produce that note. Anyway, same thing produces the colors that your eyes see. Moving on down here, we have the planets are arranged in the solar system, moving outward in order, in sequence. We have Mars being red, Jupiter being orange/yellow. We have Saturn being yellow/green, Uranus being a light blue color, and Neptune being a dark blue color, going towards purple. indigo, which means they match these notes, these frequencies, which means they are arranged, and they have there's an orderly arrangement that is meant. It's for a purpose. It is designed on purpose. Here's a chromatic picture of Saturn here with a couple of moons, in which you can see the strata of the atmosphere having a filter applied to it, in which it shows all of the various colors of the spectrum from the equator out, going in the same order of colors from red down to purple. Anyway, this is arranged in the, well, from Mars out it's the same. Doesn't really matter if it's heliocentric or geocentric. But here's the geocentric arrangement, with the moon first, and then Mercury and Venus. Obviously the Earth at the center with the sun and everything going around it. But I'm just saying that this was the ancient model. These were the ancient planets. And they did not even know, in the ancient model, they did not even have a word in the ancient world for the planet of Uranus or Neptune. They didn't even exist in the cosmological mind until the modern world a couple hundred years ago, when they were adapted in. So what I'm saying is, the point I keep trying to make is that if you want to accept the idea that the ancient people knew the whole cosmos, and they understood the cosmos, if you want to accept that the Bible has absolute authority on all things, and that it says the earth is flat, then you have to accept the model that they believed. Because that's what they were talking about when they said that. They did not believe in Neptune. They did not believe in Uranus, but they believed in Saturn and Jupiter and Mars. And those were the gods, those were the angels, those were the fallen angels at the same time, those were the seven heavens. And they went into the underworld when they set. What I'm saying is that these people did not believe the modern idea, the modern understanding of the flat earth model, of a little happy sun spinning over the top of a disk. Here's something I find very interesting. I long ago came across the idea that the planets are arranged through the Fibonacci sequence. And if you look, you see there at number 10, the 10th Fibonacci number is 55, which approximates Mercury's distance from the Sun in millions of kilometers. Of course, these are the official numbers. So you have Mercury at 57.9 million kilometers, approximates 55 on Fibonacci sequence. Venus is offset at 108, but then you have Earth at 149, which approximates 144. You have Mars at 227, which approximates 233. Then you have Ceres at 413 on this little chart here. But Ceres is one of the asteroid belt. It's the largest of the asteroid belt, named after the goddess that I just mentioned before, Demeter. But everything up there is named after something, some kind of a god somewhere. So anyway, them naming Ceres and how far away Ceres is, that's just an average. The asteroid belt is a band that is it's very wide. Anyway, so you have to look at 413 is where Ceres is, but 377 would be like the average of this whole band of asteroids. Anyway, then you get to Jupiter, which is 778, which would be somewhere between 15 and 16. If you equate it with the 610, and then you go to Saturn at 1400, which would be equivalent to 1597, then there is a missing orbit between Jupiter and Saturn where a planet should be, but there isn't one. And I've always said that there should be one between Jupiter and Saturn, and that there's either something there that is not seen, something there that they are hiding, something that is hiding behind Jupiter, or something I don't know. But all I know is that the orbits of the planets are arranged by this harmonic sequence, and that's where an orbit should be, but nothing is seen to be there. So I think something is wrong somewhere with that. There should be a planet there between Jupiter and Saturn. Anyway, then you have Uranus is 2800, approximates 2500, but as we get farther and farther out, they become more and more divergent. Then you have Neptune is 4500, and the Fibonacci number is 41, 4200. And Pluto again they demoted Pluto right back down to a dwarf planet, which is because it's part of the field of what's now called trans-Neptunian objects, which are a bunch of other planets or planetoids. Anyway, so again, it's a field of planetary bodies, and Pluto is just one of them, and it's a very wide field. So again, it's approximating the 20th Fibonacci number at 6700 there. And I thought I would go ahead and throw in a depiction of the orbital path that Venus takes over, I believe it's 8 years, 8 Earth years. Venus makes this flower symbol. And when I started seeing pictures like this, it's when it started solidifying in my mind that God would make a geocentric universe, where all the planets circle around the Earth in space. They're actually there. They're not just blips on a screen or whatever. You know, you see Copernicus, and he would talk about fixing all the so-called problems of the epicycles shown here of Venus and Mercury. And by just making the sun the center, everything goes around the sun, everything makes a simple circle around the sun. But to me, that's something very simple, that's very childlike, something a child would do, just make concentric rings. We're talking about a God here who can create matter, create reality, create time, create space, a universe, a world in which we can live and survive and do all these things, make all these things, and a whole ecosystem, a whole world, all this stuff. He makes it out of nothing, and he's gonna make it just a concentric bunch of circles. To me, this seems more like what God would do, because it fits his intelligence. It fits more with his level of creative power and his ability to. Concentric circles are just too simple. That's what humans would do. That's what we would do. It's not what he would do. He would do something befitting of his own nature, which is to say beyond ours. So that's why we have such a hard time understanding these things, is because we're trying to figure something out that's not made for us to understand necessarily. Anyway, what I'm saying is the geocentric model, when viewed in this way, seems to me to be much more elegant and much more sophisticated than just a bunch of circles spinning around. Anyway, here we get into the ancient cosmology. Here is a simple depiction of the Babylonian universe with the ziggurat there, ascending above and below, with the 7 steps representing the 7 planets of the 7 heavens, and then the 7 stages of the underworld, which is like a mirror image of the same thing. And of course, they have the vault of heaven here, in which they take place, so that the ziggurats were meant to be a mirror of those of the heavens. Then you have here a depiction of the biblical worldview, which has been somewhat Christianized here. With you have God at the top, and the heavens, the gate of heaven there, heaven is a very Christian idea. Heaven didn't really exist in the Hebrew mind in the ancient times. They had what they called the kingdom of God. They were waiting for the Messiah to restore the kingdom, make it a worldwide kingdom. I like this picture though because it shows what they did believe. You have earth in the center, the flat earth. You have the sea around it. It's basically floating there. Well, I guess it would be if it weren't for the so-called pillars holding it up, right? Inside or under the earth is Sheol, the place of the dead, the unseen, or the grave. You have clouds in the sky. You have the great deep. That's the abyss. I said earlier, the Apollyon would bring the army of demons out of the abyss. The abyss is the word for, in Hebrew it was Tehom. In Hebrew it was Tehom, which came from the Sumerian Tiamat, which was a name for the celestial dragon, which is Draco. But the abyss actually comes, that's Greek for the same word, comes from the Sumerian Apsu, which basically means the void or the pit, something like that. Same concept. Anyway, so they have the sun and the moon and the stars inside the firmament. The firmament is the dark area here of the ark. You have the sky inside of that with the clouds, mind you, and the earth below. The dome of the heaven, or the firmament. And then you have above that, it says the waters above the firmament. This is imperative for the ancient worldview that was in the Bible. I cannot stress this enough, that this is the biblical flat earth cosmological model. All the sun, the moon, and the stars are either inside the dome or fixed to the dome, the firmament. There are waters above the firmament, and the rain does not come from the clouds. It comes from holes or windows in heaven. In the firmament dome, there are holes that open up, which is where they say the rain came from. I am not kidding you. That is what it says. The windows of heaven open, and the water comes down. The flood waters of Noah came down because the firmament opened up and the waters from above came down. It also says the waters from below, the great deep, broke up through the earth and made the flood. So if you're going to believe the biblical flat earth model, you're going to have to believe in holes in the sky where the rain comes from. Now here we have the Nordic model, which I always like. This is the world tree, which is very similar to the Mayan world tree over here. Both the Mayans and the Nords had the world tree. The Nordic world tree, called Yggdrasil, held up the 9 worlds. And what you have is you have Middle Earth, or Midgard, and the plane of this earth. These are all parts of the earth plane. Then you have the other systems here above and below. So you have 9 total, which to me, even though there are 9, there are basically, that I equate that with the 7 still, even though they added a couple extra ones in. But you have Asgard is basically their heaven. Helheim is basically their hell. But hell comes from the Greek word Hades. Our word hell comes from the Old English and the Nordic word hell, which means hidden or unseen, which is equivalent to Greek Hades. So Helheim is equivalent to the Greek Hades or the underworld. Okay. Now you also had Niflheim. It's spelled with a V here, but it's usually spelled with an F, pronounced Niflheim. Okay. Now, in the Bible, in the New Testament Greek, there's also a place called Tartarus, where the fallen angels were supposed to be sent by God and chained. Peter talks about it. In the Book of Enoch, they also talk about this idea, but they have him going to all of these different worlds, see, just like is shown here. These are the 7 planets, or the 9 planets as the case may be. But Enoch was said to be going to them one by one and interacting with people there. And when he got to the heaven equivalent to Niflheim, he was talking to the fallen angels there, such as Azazel. The Nephil, of course, comes from the Nephilim. In the Hebrew, Nephil means to fall, from which we get the idea of fallen. Alright, just like the NFL, the Giants, the Titans. In Nashville, where I live, the football team is called the Titans. I remember when they came out with those guys, I knew even back in the 90s, I thought that's the best name for an NFL team they could have. What better name other than the Titans? For the NFL, or the Nephilim, the giants, the fallen ones. Anyway, you have here the Niflheim is the place. It's another underworld, but it's the place where the demons went, is what I'm saying. It's the Nordic equivalent. And of course you have Alfheim here, the world of the elves, and so on. Jotunheim, I believe, is the world of giants. Anyway, then you have the Mayan cosmology, which is a pyramid, which, just like it showed in the Babylonian scheme, goes above and below the surface. They have the world tree here, which was a cosmological world tree. You can look it up. It was shown as a cross. Like you have the vertical tree here, and then the world plane makes the cross. That was equated in the night sky with the ecliptic and the tropics, and how the White Road, or the Milky Way, crosses over against the horizontal ecliptic. It makes a cross. That was their cosmological, or their world cross, world tree. And so they have the roots going into the underworld for the 5 levels down, 5 underworlds. Then you have the branches going up into the 7 heavens, or the 7 overworlds, which are the 7 planets. And then you have the middle world, or Midgard, which is the central plane. Altogether makes 13 worlds. And then here again is a picture I was talking about before, where they had a flat plane. This is overly simplified, but it's the idea there is that it's a flat plane with the sun and the moon spinning around it, going over and under, above and below, and into the underworld. So that's what I meant to say with that. Now, as I said before, Shem was said to have cut up Nimrod's body and sent it to the 7 cities. The 7 cities were the main central points for the Sumerian kingdom. As you can see here, these highlighted cities: Spar, Larak, Nippur, Surpak, Bad-Tubira, Larsa, Eridu. These are the main cities. Here you have Ashur, way up here. This is Assyria. This is in the northern aspect of these 2 rivers here. Babylon and Acadia, or Akkad, is in the central area. And then the further back you go back to Sumer. Sumer was down in here in the lower area. In fact, well, here's Nippur. Make a mental note of that. That's probably the most important city of all of these, other than Babylon itself. Nippur is the oldest city, pretty much on the map. Here is the Babylonian cosmos, a bit more defined, where you have the vault of the heavens, the constellations. You can see here the zodiac, here's Scorpio, here's the crab, so on and so forth. Above that, right here, you have the host of gods, or the 7 planets. And then the king of them all is Anu. They've actually believed that the mountains held up the sky in the ancient world, held up the vault of the heavens. Anyway, then you have the underworld here. Here is Enki with his waters, which are making the seas. And like I said, Inanna or Ishtar went into the underworld through the 7 gates to become queen of the underworld, basically. Here is showing the abyss, which, like I said before, is the Apsu, which, interestingly enough, is where the fallen ones, the Anunnaki, were said to be mining the gold. If you read Sitchin's books, he says that they mined for the gold in the Apsu, the abyss, where John in Revelation says the demons come out of. Even though Sitchin equates that with South Africa, that's not what the Bible says. Anyway, here again is another depiction of the 7 cities, showing that they are actually in alignment. They're all in a straight line, and when they diverge from that line, they're actually on equidistant angles from the central line. Now, these 7 cities, each were dedicated to a different god, and they each had their own temple dedicated to them, which was a ziggurat, like I showed you a minute ago, with the 7 stages. Here is one such ziggurat, the one that was in Babylon, that was as tall as it was wide, and which means that it actually made a cube if you outline the whole thing. This Tower of Babylon was said to reach the heavens not because it was so tall, but because it incorporated into it, they had incorporated into it the astronomical knowledge of the day, where you could cite the stars and constellations, and this was the astrologer priest. Like I said, Babylon was the beginning of the mystery religions made by Ham, or Shamash, and then whose grandson, Asher, or Nimrod, conquered the land of Babylon and made the kingdom that then perpetuated that religion. Now here we have the dimensions of this tower, showing you the degrees and the relative size to one another. Each one of these stages here were given as a depiction. Basically, this was a depiction of the Northern Hemisphere. (33 degrees, 51, up to 75. So that this was showing, this was Sitchin's picture in his book, showing that they were used for an astronomical observatory. Here is the Tower of Babel itself, as depicted in the Renaissance era, as just a gigantic tower, round, but in actuality it was shaped like this, with 7 layers, 7 tiers, obviously for the 7 heavens, 7 planets. They have it colored here. I'm not sure the original was colored. I do know that it is said that the original pyramid, the Great Pyramid, was colored the 7 colors of the rainbow, with a gold pyramidion on top, which has since long been removed. Anyway, so the 7 planets, each of the stages was for one of the planets, and like I said, each city was dedicated to a different god, and the god was said to reside at the top in the temple of each of these ziggurats. So then you have each of the planets was identified as one of the gods. The sun god was Shamash in Babylonian. Moon god was Suin or Nana. Mars was Nergal. Mercury was Enki or Nabu. Interestingly, Nabu is the word in Babylonian from which we get the Hebrews get the word Nabi, which is the Hebrew word for prophet. Again, Mercury was the god of knowledge, equated with Enoch. Jupiter is Marduk, Venus is Ishtar, and Saturn is Ninurta. The cities that they were located at are given here, like I just showed you: Nippur, Eridu, Fatibira, Sippar, so on and so forth. These gods all had equivalencies in every other religion, pagan religion. Obviously, like I said, Saturn was the Egyptian god Set, Venus was Isis, Jupiter was Osiris, Mercury is Thoth, Mars is Anhur. The moon was actually called Yah. The Egyptian moon god was called Yah. So anytime you hear someone talking about Yah, that's what it goes back to. Even the name Yahweh would go back to the Egyptian god Yah for the moon. And then of course the sun was Ra, or the Atum. Horus is not the sun god. Horus was the god of light. There is a distinction there. Greco-Roman, Set became Kronos or Saturn, Isis became Aphrodite and Venus, Osiris became Zeus and Jupiter, Thoth is Hermes or Mercury, Anhur is Ares, Mars, Yah is Selene or Luna, and Ra became Helios/Apollo. These became, in the Norse, Messuna, Mani, Tyr, Odin, Thor, and Frigg, which then became, of course, our days of the week: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Now here is a depiction from about 600 BC on a stele erected by Nebuchadnezzar from the Bible. And it shows him building a 7-stage tower, which people have said was maybe 100 years ago. They thought that that was depicting the Tower of Babel, that the story came from that instance. But what he's actually doing, some have also said that that's just building the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. But that's not actually true. What he's doing is restoring an ancient ziggurat from the Sumerian days that had, of course, fallen into disrepair after a couple of thousand years, because they're made of mud brick and not stone, because that environment is not conducive to stonework. It's just a bunch of sand and dirt. There's not really any stone around. So they made everything out of mud brick, which means it basically dissolves and erodes over time, unlike the pyramids of Egypt. Anyway, so this is Nebuchadnezzar restoring one of the old ancient ziggurats. That ziggurat was actually destroyed, by the way, later on in 484 BC by the Persian king Xerxes. Anyway, there are ruins here of other ziggurats, such as the one at Chogaz-en-Bil, which was built around 1250 BC by the king Untash-Naparisha, mainly to honor one of their gods there. The most widely known ziggurat is actually the one at Ur. It dates back to the time of Abraham. It was built around 2100 BC by the king Shulgi, dedicated to the moon god Nana, or Sin, and originally stood around 210 feet tall. As you can see there, had been eroded over time and has since gone under modern reconstruction there. Shulgi actually later claimed to be a god himself. Abraham, by the way, who became a Melchizedek when he went to Salem, and Shem, being an old man at the time, having lived through the flood 300 years before, And he could live that long because he was born before the flood and carried that DNA with him. But he was getting old, around 600, and no, probably more like 500 at the time. He died at 600. Anyway, so Abraham came to him, and he passed on the Melchizedek priesthood to Abraham, which is why God made the covenant with him. Anyway, Abraham originally was from Ur, and from a priestly family. Okay, so apparently he was a son of Shem in the past, but his part of the family had migrated as well over to Babylon, over to Ur, where the family had taken up practicing and participating in those religions there, the occult religion there, of the mystery. And so Abraham was actually a priest of that religion in Ur at the time, which, like I said, was dedicated to the moon god. And so then he left and went back to Salem and became the Melchizedek there. Then, like I said, that the Hebrews, of course, went down into Egypt, stayed for 400 years, carrying the God of Abraham, but adopting the Egyptian name for it, Yah, which then became Yahweh. But it's still the same God. It came from Ur, which is sin, from which the name Sinai, or Sinai, is derived, because that was the supposed territorial jurisdiction of that God. Nabonidus was the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, reigning from 556 to 539 BC. I copied a bit from Wiki, talking about him, where he says he took an interest in Babylon's past, excavating ancient buildings and displaying his archaeological discoveries in a museum. In most ancient accounts, he is depicted as a royal anomaly. Nabonidus is supposed to have worshipped the moon god Sin beyond all the other gods, to have paid special devotion to Sin's temple at Haran, where his mother was a priestess, and to have neglected the Babylonian primary god Marduk. He left the capital for the desert oasis of Tema in Arabia early in his reign, from which he only returned after many years. In the meantime, his son Belshazzar ruled from Babylon. Belshazzar is mentioned in the Bible, being there when Babylon fell. Nabonidus is most revered and is known as the first archaeologist. Not only did he lead the first excavations, which were to find the foundation deposits of the temples of Shamash, the sun god, the warrior goddess Anunnatu, and the sanctuary of Naram Sin, the moon god, located in Haran, but he also had them restored to their former glory. So here again we see ancient accounts of people in the ancient world already restoring much older ancient buildings to keep them going. And so it just shows you how ancient these things are, if they are keep being rebuilt over and over again, thousands of years, and still being there today. As you can see, like with Borsippa here, restored in 600 BC, and now it looks like this. So you can see where this leads. Okay, this may be going a bit astray from the topic of the Book of Enoch itself, but I thought that it would fit. Long ago, I came across the concept on my own. I haven't really heard anyone else say this, but I was going through Strong's Encyclopedia of Ecclesiastical History, and I came across, in the topic of Babylon, a depiction of the old city, which is shown here on the left, taken from Herodotus' account of the city about 400 BC, which was saying that it was a city based on the idea of a square, and it was crossing a river, which is how it was able to be captured. Babylon was captured because they came through the walls in the river. During a great Babylonian festival, during one of these pagan festivals that last the whole week, and everybody's so damn drunk and out of it that they don't know what's going on by the end of it. This is how Cyrus was able to take over Babylon. Anyway, so the city crosses the river, which is going basically north and south. The right-hand side of it was based off of a square, which is devoted to the gardens, with the city itself in the center. And I noticed that struck a chord with me because I knew that Washington, D.C. itself had been laid out by a set of squares, a system of squares, including the whole thing. And not only that, was it a diamond shape, a square on its edge, just like Babylon here, but also it spanned a river. So the whole thing was originally a square. Nowadays, since its original inception, the part on the left-hand side of the river had been given back to Virginia, so it's no longer technically a part of D.C., just the right-hand part, just like it shows with Babylon here on the right-hand side. And this artist rendition here in the bottom, showing what it might have looked like. In the center here, where it has this little red square, that is where the temple was that I showed you before, with the ziggurat in the cube and all of that. That was this section here, called the Esagila. The ziggurat to Etanin Anki, actually. So that actually means the priest of heaven and earth, or the king of heaven and earth. Anyway, so here is actually a sort of a comical depiction, I think, of this square, where it actually has boundary markers showing the limitations of the original District of Columbia. And it actually tells you where they are. Finley Town, U.S. Reservoir, Chain Bridge. Down here you have Upton Hill. There's what you have. They actually draw the ones that have fallen down. Right here it says stump only. Right here it says stump in the ground. This one is missing. And this one here, fallen over, says it's in the yard of 1200 Wilk Street. This is funny to me. Anyway, this is like an actual map of the boundary of Washington, D.C., which, as we all know, has been laid out according to the designs of these evil draconian bastards. I mean, everybody knows the layouts of D.C., the streets. They have the pentagram, the hexagram. They've got the Masonic symbol here with the capital at the top, and the White House over here. You've got the Masonic temple, the world, the head Masonic lodge of the world is in D.C., and I believe it's 13 blocks away from the White House. Down here is the Washington Monument, across the reflecting pool. Oh, here it is, right here is the Washington Monument, and there's the reflecting pool. The giant phallic symbol inside of an oval shape is not suggestive of anything. Not at all. Here again, like I say, you have the square design. The whole thing is based off of a cubic sort of mentality, with these streets the way that they are. Again, you can see here the Masonic compass and square symbol. Here again, this is called the cross. This is called the mall. It's set up like a cross, but here is the head. You can see the owl here, the fat owl with the ears or horns, the capital here. This is the top. Here's the compass going down. There's the White House, like I said. This is supposed to be a cross, but if this is the top, then that means this is the bottom, which means this cross is inverted. It's an upside down cross. So yeah, there's that. And here is this. This is the goddess Columbia, which is atop the Capitol building. But of course that's not Columbia. Like I said before, it's actually Athena, which you can see here, with her owl on her shoulder. Athena was the goddess of war, basically. Columbia is supposedly it's a type of the deification of the constellation Virgo, personification of Virgo. But given the warrior attributes of Athena, you get this, Columbia. You can see it has a headdress, the sword. It's the same thing, basically. The owl, again, goes back to Ishtar. It's a female deity. The owls go along with that. That is a falcon. Here you have the owl for the Hooters girls. Here is the owl on the dollar bill. Here's the owl around the Capitol building. Here's the owl on the coins of Athens, the tetradrachma and the decadrachma. And of course here is the owl at Bohemian Grove. Dedicated, these are parts of the goddess. They're associated with the goddess of Athena and of Ishtar. And she is here. Also, this is obviously the Statue of Liberty. They call this the Goddess Liberty. That's what they actually call her. And then you have the Statue of Liberty, of course, given to us by the Freemasons. And there's one in France as well. Nothing free about it. The whole thing shows our slavery. Anyway, I came up with this here. I was just I came up with this idea first. Towards the end of this, that I was making this chart, I just thought, how tall is the Capitol itself? And the Capitol dome is actually, this thing is 288 feet. But it turns out the ziggurat was supposed to be 300 feet. It's given in 7 stages, like I said. And the goddess the god was supposed to live at the top, in the temple at the top. Okay, and so you have this multi-layered dome here with all these different names given for each one. You can see how I have it delineated here for each set. And of course the goddess of liberty, or Athena, Columbia, whoever you want to call her, is at the top, where the goddess would be. More interestingly, I came across the idea that some people were saying, some sources were saying, that Herodotus' accounts and other accounts of the ancient ziggurats might have been exaggerated, that they weren't 300 feet, or he said, Herodotus said the walls of Babylon were 400 feet tall. But anyway, and he said that they were so wide that you could drive multiple chariots side by side down the tops of the wall. He was known for his exaggerations. So anyway, I knew that Sitchin, like I showed you before, had done his angles for the astrological aspect of it, the astronomical aspects of it, were based off of the original 300-foot height. And so I said, okay, well, what would it be? They were saying it was probably more like 180 feet. So I said, what would the angles be if you made it 180 feet? And so I actually made a model here of the thing at 180 feet. And I measured out the angles. And it turns out the angles are actually better at 180 feet than they were at 300. You can get out a protractor and measure it yourself. Measure it not from the ground level, because that's, if you're going to look at the sky from the ground, you're not going to need a temple in the first place. The whole reason you need a tower is to get off the ground. So you measure it from the first stage. You measure the angles. There's 0. You measure it to the third stage. The angle from the center to the third stage is 30 degrees. Up here to the 6th stage is 60 degrees. And then, of course, straight to the top is 90. Then I went to the second stage and measured out. So the first stage is 10. The next one above that is 10 degrees. The second one above is 20 degrees. The third one above is 30 degrees. The fourth one is 45 degrees. And the 6th one here at the top, this is actually 66 degrees. These are very even numbers. These are exact. Very striking to me. Over here, I measured out the 300 again, myself instead of going by Sitchin's numbers, and I measured it from here, from the angle of these steps, because I noticed that the angle of the steps points straight up to this point here, the edge of the third tier. And so that's 36 degrees, and so I kept with that, and these are 18, 30, 36, 40, 44, 48, 54, and 60. Most of these are divisible by 6, which makes sense because the Babylonian and Sumerian system actually was sexagesimal, which means they based it off of 60, which is 6 times 10. So they can either have multiples of 10 or multiples of 6. So finding multiples of 6 is actually something to be expected. However, 40 and 44 are not divisible by 6. So that's a bit of an anomaly. But anyway, I found this was very surprising, very startling to me. I did not expect that at all. Anyway, this is the Emerald Tablet of Thoth. Like I said, Thoth is equivalent to the Greek god Hermes. This is the god of wisdom, the god of knowledge, the god of writing, who supposedly invented writing. And Thoth is equated with Hermes. Hermes is equated with Enoch. So this needs to be looked at then, because this is supposedly something written by Thoth. You can see there it says Hermetis Trismegesti, which is Hermes the thrice great. So even though it's called the Emerald Tablet of Thoth, but it's actually the Emerald Tablet of Hermes, because it's the same thing. But they consider Thoth to be not an Egyptian god, but an actual, like, Atlantean king. And Atlantis comes from Plato. It's a depiction of the antediluvial world as seen as being made perfect. It's like the idealized world. Before the flood, it was the golden age. Everything was perfect. Highest level of development and human achievement. The Emerald Tablet of Hermes is the foundation of Western alchemical thought and practice as we know it today. I'm reading here from some guy's history that I found of the text. I should name the guy. I've actually forgotten who it was. Oh well. He says alchemy is essentially the practical application of Hermetic philosophy. Anytime the word Hermetic is used, or Hermeticism, it's actually talking about the magical art as it pertains to Mercury, Thoth, or Hermes, or like I say by extension to Enoch. Contrary to common perception, which sees alchemy as a mere lust for gold, and hang on, let me skip down here. Let me get to the point. Okay, the Emerald Tablet is said to be a tablet of emerald or green stone inscribed with the secrets of the universe. It is the source of the original teachings of the alchemical practice, but the original origin is unclear. Hence it is surrounded by legends. The most common legend claims that the tablet was found in a cave under the statue of Hermes in Tana, clutched in the hands of the corpse of Hermes himself. Another legend suggests that it was the third son of Adam and Eve, Seth, who originally wrote it. Others believe that the tablet was once held within the Ark of the Covenant. Some even claim that the original source of the Emerald Tablet is none other than the fabled city of Atlantis itself. The oldest documentable source of the Emerald Tablet's text was an Arabic work named the Book of the Secret of Creation and the Art of Nature, which was itself a composite of earlier works. This was an Arabic work written in the early 8th century AD. Based on this Arabic work, some believe that the Emerald Tablet was an Arabic work written between the 6th and 8th centuries AD, rather than a piece of work from antiquity, as many have claimed, which is what it would be. It would be from that time frame of the 6th or 8th century. The Emerald Tablet would become one of the pillars of Western alchemy. It was a highly influential text in medieval and Renaissance alchemy. Numerous commentaries have also been written regarding its contents. For instance, a translation was made by Isaac Newton and was discovered among his alchemical papers. Alright, so here you have a picture of Thoth with the all-seeing eye and what's known as Metatron's cube. Here is actually a depiction of a closer-up picture of this. You can see the letters, Proto-Syriac or Aramaic, trying to give it the appearance of age. Anyway, here's Metatron's cube. Enoch is said, I said that he was changed. Supposedly, in rabbinical lore, he was supposed to have been changed into the angel Metatron. Here is a depiction of Metatron with the name given on it as El Shaddai. You can see with his horns there. Here is Metatron's cube as it represents the various Platonic solids. The hexahedron or cube, the octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron. These are 6 sides, 8 sides, 12, and 20 sides. Alright, like I said before, all the angels and stuff come from the Kabbalistic practice, Kabbalistic lore. Like I said, the Zohar, and all of those types of things. This is the tree of life, which is the basis of all Kabbalistic practice. The symbol of the Kabbalah is the tree of life. The Kabbalists made different sets of alphabets, different languages, trying to find ways to divine the mysteries. Using gematria, Hebrew gematria, and such things as that, which is what the Kabbalah is all about. The letters and the rearranging of the letters. And this is the magical practice. It's a magical practice of gematria, alchemical practices, mixed in with equidistant letter spacing. Basically, they're trying to take the Bible, other texts in Hebrew, and twist them all around, see what they can find. To bend it, to twist it, to warp it into something else, to force it into another shape, basically, and see what comes out of it. These are called angelic scripts, by the way. The Malachim alphabets. Here we have a picture of John Dee from the 1500s. An English mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, occult philosopher, and imperialist, an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, devoted much of his life to the study of alchemy, divination, and the Hermetic philosophy. Developed the Enochian alphabet. For the purpose of finding out the mysteries of the universe. He made a language, the Enochian language. You can see here the Enochian dictionary. I actually had this dictionary. This actually just says Enochian dictionary in Enochian. It doesn't actually say the actual words for dictionary. It just says it in English with those letters. Here is how it would work. You would make a magic square, a tablature, and fill it with a sequence of letters. Then you would draw lines in different angles, different ways, like the symmetrical design here, okay? And then through these patterns, you would then pick up the letters, and this would spell the names of the different angels. This one here would be 4 letters, this one here would be 3, this one would be 3, so on and so forth. And this makes all these different patterns of lines, which is where you get sigils from. This is known as sigil magic. And this is the point behind these types of things, these necklaces and things like that. That's the whole point. Now they're just talismans and charms and things like that. This here is the Sigillum Amet, or Imet. And basically it's the seal of God, or the sigil of God, and it was said to give practitioners the ability to control all living creatures. If you could master the meaning of these symbols and these words, this language, then you could become a master of reality. Here is a larger tablature to write the letters in. You can see. And here's a larger still frame. And you can see how it would work. You would take these lines, these sigils, and mark them over the, if I can do it here, you mark them over the lines, and these lines will draw out the characters. That's why when you see these kinds of symbols, that's what it's actually talking about. These look crazy, but that's because you don't know the context. You don't know the original layout of the system, the design. That's what makes them sigils. And that's why their power is supposedly secret and hidden. Alright. Moving on down. I thought I would bring this up as well. Back in 2007 or so, I came across the audio archives of a guy named John Todd. Was a guy in the 70s who claimed to come out of the Illuminati. Said that he was born into it after having been, his family had been in it since the 1600s. And that supposedly, according to him, he was actually a pretty high-ranking type of individual within the organization of the Illuminati. You can say what you want about it, but it's interesting to hear what he has to say for that time frame. One of the things that he was talking about was that there was a book, which he called the Necronomicon, which he said was a book that was written by Lucifer once upon a time, that had been copied down and passed on through the generations, and that there were pages that were added to it that for the new generations of the Illuminists would actually have to sign their name in the book in their own blood to prove their dedication to Lucifer and the cause of the Illuminati system. They said this book was actually bound in lamb's hide, lamb's skin, and it's called the Necronomicon. Actually, what would be the dead law, from Greek necro, death, and nomu, which is law. So that's the law of death, as opposed to the law of God, the Torah, which is the Bible. The fact that they would actually bind it in lamb's skin is the antithesis, or a mockery, of what's called the Lamb's Book of Life, which is what the Bible says that Christ has with all the names of the elect people who he had atoned for and have been saved. Their names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And so then conversely, Satan or Lucifer, the Illuminati, has this Book of Death. And they sign their name in the Book of Death. Now I actually had a copy of a popularized Necronomicon. The word Necronomicon, of course, comes from the Cthulhu mythos of Lovecraft. That he just used this idea of this evil book in his stories. And people have seen fit to make their own versions of this book, such as Simon's Necronomicon, shown here, or Donald Tyson's Necronomicon, with the red background there. I'm just using those pictures as as an example to associate with what I'm talking about. Underneath that, you have shown the spine of the binding there of a book called Isis Unveiled from 1877 by Helena Blavatsky on the esoteric philosophies of the Theosophical movement, which is the origin of the New Age movement and this whole Age of Horus stuff. It all comes basically from her reorganizing the occult esoteric ideas and sort of focusing them and honing them into a shape, a recognizable, discernible shape. So she wrote this book, Isis Unveiled, and it pretty much changed the occult world in the 20th, for the 20th century anyway. I mean, you talk about things like Crowley and stuff like that. Crowley would not have been able to. Crowley could have only done what he did had these guys done what they did before. And so this is the idea of the whole Age of Horus, the New Age stuff. If you look into it, you can trace the New Age back to Blavatsky. Next to that is The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. It is probably the best book to get on the topic if you want to look into the esoteric teachings of the occultists. Not to believe it, but to see the worldview that they have. I find it very interesting, and sort of it's sad to me that so many truthers will actually fall into this and consider that to be the truth. What we have here, consider the source. Consider the source. Then you have the Book of Mormon, which John Todd also talked about as having been basically plagiarized from the Illuminati Necronomicon. And of course they talk about Joseph Smith being a Mason and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, he talked about the belief system of the Mormons actually is very occultic, very strange. If you look into it, how they say that we came from a planet called Kolob, and it's just very strange that we're all gods. God used to be a person, but now he's a god and he made Earth, and we're all going to be gods one day, and we're going to go off and make our own worlds. And but John Todd was talking about the aspect of their philosophy that mirrors what was then esoteric back in the 1800s. The idea that Lucifer made man. He was actually talking about Tolkien as well, talking about the hobbits and men and the elves, and how the elves were the gods and hobbits were the original people, and the regular men were made by mixing the two. And this is a metaphor for the gods coming and mating with the original people, and that made modern man Homo sapien. But that's in the Book of Mormon as well, that they talk about in the Mormon religion, that Lucifer is actually the father of Adam, and that it was produced by a similar union with some primitive type of a proto-human. And Adam was the first modern, or Homo sapien. And he was talking about how in the 60s and 70s, the occult, or the Illuminati, he said there was a war going on, and that there were some of them who wanted to promote it and hand it out to people, put it out in the public, promote witchcraft as being popular and trendy, and put it in movies, and put it in music, and make it desirable to the population at large. But he was saying also there's other ones that did not want that to happen. They wanted to keep it basically what you would call Illuminati conservatives, who wanted to keep it the way it had always been and not put it out to the public. But so in the 60s, you have books coming out like Eric von Daniken, Chariots of the Gods, and other books that he wrote. And then also Sitchin in the 70s started coming out with what is called the alien astronaut theory, or now known as the ancient alien theory, where gods came here, the aliens came here, and they took the apes, or they took the prototypical humans, and they spliced their DNA with ours, and they made modern man. They made us so much better. But the fact is, like I said, the opposite is true. They took our DNA and they messed it up and spliced it with other things and basically devolved us rather than evolved us. And the same thing will happen again if we start letting them mess with our DNA again. And then you get on down to the 90s and you have guys coming out like Graham Hancock with fingerprints of the gods and that sort of a thing. And he's written a bunch of books on the topic as well. You can see the Sphinx here. The idea is we have to consider the source of all these things. In ISIS Unveiled, in the Theosophical movement, the New Age movement, they talk about the Ascended Masters, which is, I used to read David Icke, but I started noticing, I liked all of what he was saying about the global cabal and the bankers and the wars and all of this stuff. All these things that everybody can agree on. But then he starts going off into this strange kind of quasi world where he just seems to be agreeing with everything that the occultists are saying. How that these people, the Illuminists, the Illuminati, take their orders from the Ascended Masters. But these guys will be presented as the saviors one day. And that they'll have a projection in the sky of some kind of return of Christ, or, you know, some alien invasion, or whatever. The aliens come to invade us and we fight them off and win, or the aliens come to save us from an invasion. Maybe Christ is the invasion and we beat off Jesus, or whatever. Who knows what the hell they're going to do. But the idea is there that they're going to make some kind of projection in the sky, and these saviors, these ascended masters, these alien gods are going to come save us, presumably from some kind of a fake or false return of Christ. And they'll have a picture of, you know, like some kind of a Jesus in the sky or something, some kind of an aerial battle, with perhaps these aliens saving the day by defeating Jesus. This is what I'm thinking. But who knows what they will do. But these kind of things are on the table. They are possible. Alright. Now here we get into the crux of the matter, which I believe is the most important aspect of the Book of Enoch, which is the cosmological aspect of the second part that I was talking about at the beginning, which was made somewhere 200 to 100 BC, and was right at the time that they were, it seemed like all of the ancient cultures at the time were in the process of changing over their calendrical system at the time to reflect a day that was 365 days as a solar calendar. And so you can see clearly there in the corner is the 12 signs of the zodiac, which is the basis for all calendrical systems. The 12 months are derived from the 12 signs of the zodiac, even though I know they're not lined up. That is why we have 12 months. You can see here, here's the Earth and the Sun. The line being drawn from the Earth to the Sun against the backdrop of the stars shows the actual sign that the Sun is at the time. Here's a depiction of the zodiac from the top down. Here is the times of the year: summer, spring, autumn, and winter. So there's Polaris in the center with Draco, Big Dipper, Little Dipper, and This is a good depiction. There is the year of the 12 months someone made, describing the names. January, named after Janus, the two-faced god, looking to the past and the future, god of gateways. February, named after the Februa, the ritual sacrifice, which became the Lupercala. Lupercus was the god of shepherds, and the Lupercalia was celebrated in the middle of the month, the Februa, the 14th of February, which is, of course, is now it's Valentine's Day, which is dedicated to the god of sex. March is named after Mars, the god of war. April named after Aprilis, to open. Actually, that's actually a contraction of the name for Aphrodite, April. May is named after Maya, the goddess of fertility. June named after Juno, goddess of marriage. July named after Julius Caesar. August named after Augustus Caesar. And then September, October, November, and December are named after the numbers in Latin of 7, 8, 9, and 10. Because originally they only had 10 months, and then after they reformed the calendar, they added in January and February. Originally it started in March. The god of Mars was first, you see, for Rome, and yeah, Mars was first because of the spring equinox, obviously. And here we have a depiction of the Gregorian calendar. Every day marked out, delineated as its own separate entity. But the Gregorian calendar is simply a reworking of the leap year system of the Julian calendar, which is also depicted here as having each day separated with descriptions of what happens on that day. It's a very detailed charts. But it all goes back, like I say, to the Sumerian Babylonian calendar of the sun. But you have the first month here in Babylonian was Nisanu. Second month was Ilaru. Third month was Simanu. And so on. Even on down to number 4 here, which is Dumuzi or Tammuz, which was Nimrod's son. Tammuz was Nimrod's son. Dumuzi, Ashur's son. Anyway, so you keep going around. Abu, Tashritu. These are Babylonian. And this is the calendar that the Hebrews picked up when they went to Babylon. They were there for 70 years before they came back. Not all of them came back, but when they did, they brought back with them the calendar of the Babylonians. First month Nisan, second month Ayar, third month Sivani, fourth month Tammuz, fifth month Ab, so on and so forth. They kept their feasts and their holy days. Passover, first fruits, unleavened bread, Pentecost. On down you have Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. But they kept the days, but they changed the calendar. Specifically the names from what would be a solar calendar. They kept the lunar calendar, but they changed the month names to fit the solar names of the Babylonian calendar. Alright? And so what we have then with Enoch and his courses of the sun and the moon, and he's talking about the 12 portals. The 12 portals of the sun are the 12 signs of the zodiac. Alright, here you go. Okay. And so, here you have the entire year divided up into solar months. 12 solar months of 30 days, except every third one was 31 days, and the last one was 32. This makes 365 days. divided by the year into 4 sections from the equinoxes and solstices. This is a very good calendar. This is a very good calendar. I like what is being done here. It's calendrical reform from the second part of the Book of Enoch, which is the main part, and it's the part that concerns flat earthers. But when it talks about the sun and the 12 portals, I'm telling you true, it's the 12 signs of the zodiac, and that's just what it is. Anyway, the Book of Enoch was not canonized, mostly because of this particular fact, because it went against the order of the day, which was the lunar calendar, which they based the feasts on, because the Bible says, it's in the law, you have to go by what it calls the sighted moon. Each month has to be based off of the sighted moon. Now, they picked up the Babylonian month names, but like I said, they kept the lunar structure. They also picked up the Babylonian year, but they kept the lunar structure because it's by the Torah. You have to keep time by the cycles of the moon. Each month is counted by when the moon is first sighted, after the new moon. Enoch's calendar goes by the solar calendar entirely, with no lunar intercalation. And to the Jews, to the Hebrews, that was not acceptable. And so they could not accept the Book of Enoch for that purpose, even if they liked the rest of it. Now here we have a picture of the Dendera cosmology from Egypt. In the ancient world. And you can see here all the different constellations with their depictions. Here's Draco towards the center, the spinning around the center, Ursa Minor, Ursa Major. You have Scorpio and Libra and the various signs around here, Taurus, so on and so forth. Here's Orion, which, like I said, is Nimrod, basically. There's the star Sirius, which they had the Egyptians had a secondary calendar based off the star Sirius because it matched the inundation of the Nile River, which is where their crops came from. It was dependent upon the flooding of the Nile. So they basically had a calendar devoted just to that. But anyway, my point is, the whole cosmos was seen to circle around the pole star. That's the point. Okay. Now we have here depictions of the 12 signs as it relates to the Hebrew tribes, 12 tribes. The Scorpion is Dan, Sagittarius is Gad, Simeon is Capricorn, you have Levi is Pisces, Joseph is Taurus, you know, on and on. Judah's Leo, the lion, of course. That was the idea of it. So that whenever so much of biblical prophecy is just talking about the stars, all these crazy images, these crazy animals, all the the dragons with all the heads. But the dragon's going to be Draco, the 7-headed dragon's going to be Hydra. Ezekiel is talking in the Old Testament. He's talking about angels with 4 heads, 4 faces. And so you end up with crazy pictures like this thing here. The four cherubs that are carrying the throne of God, and all the angels have 4 faces, and they have all these wheels. And it's a very strange depiction, leading people to come up with crazy shit like this. What the hell is that? You have here on this tarot card, you have, it's the world. This is Gaia, the world. But then around here, it's actually the world. It's the world. The world is the cosmos, not the earth. It is the entire cosmos. And this card has depicted here the signs: a man, an eagle, a lion, and an ox, which just happen to be the faces that Ezekiel says the angels have, the 4 angels. that hold up the throne of God are the man, the eagle, the ox, and the lion. But this is, very obviously, this is Leo. The ox is Taurus. The man is Aquarius. And the eagle, to them, that is the same as our version of Scorpio. But they called it an eagle. Here's the same thing on the Masonic heraldry symbol with these crazy angels with the four symbols here, the lion, the ox, the man, and the eagle, are the four corners of the cosmos, the four pillars, you might say. So here we go. Here's this again. The origin of the idea of a cherub or a sphinx comes from combining the lion, Leo, Taurus the bull, Aquarius the man, and the eagle. You have the head of the man, the wings of the eagle, and the body of the lion there. So that's these symbols combined into one makes the cherub. They have four faces. They each have four faces, but it's four of them. And these are the wheels of the heavens, or the spheres of the stars, which is right here. It's the sphere of the stars, which is circling the pole star. Okay, but you have the four corners: the man, the bull, the lion, and the eagle. These are the constellations of the zodiac that spin around the ecliptic, around the edge. They hold up the throne of God, which is the spinning dome of the firmament with God at the top, which is Polaris. God is up here. And the cherubs that hold up the throne of God and all of the rings that Ezekiel says that they are so high that they are dreadful. The cherubs of the zodiac hold up the vault of the heavens. That is the throne of God. And that's what Ezekiel is talking about. Then here we have what's called vector circles of the horoscope, or of the astrological signs, divided into 12 sections of the sky for their particular radians. You can see the stars of the zodiac, the constellational signs. Go over here, you can see the actual angles by degrees. If you divide the whole thing by 360, it will show you, this shows you, if these lines are evenly divided into 12 parts, but it's showing you how the stars overlap the different zones so that they don't all take up the same area in the sky. Right? And again, once again, here is the it's not a zodiacal symbol, but it's the months, and it's the calendar, which is based off the zodiac. Alright. Now here we have the most ancient depiction of the night sky centered on Polaris, predating Egypt. Here is Scorpio, here is Sipar, that's the city location. The rock is one of the 7 cities here. 7 cities, Shuruppak, so on. But then here we have Orion in the sky, we have the Pleiades, here's Taurus, we have the Eagle, Aquila, Scorpio again, Libra here. These are constellations. Here's the actual disk of the star chart, the Sumerian star map that dates from 3300 BC, which is what I say, if there is a Book of Enoch, it's going to be from 3300 BC. It's going to be written in cuneiform, and it's going to be about the stars. And so that's why I say this could be, if there is one, the real Book of Enoch. And that's what I have to say about it. Very detailed. I could not find a very large image, sadly. But anyway, this is the most ancient star chart of the northern hemisphere there is, and all mythology in the ancient world comes from the constellations of the Northern Hemisphere. And so this is what it is. And I think that's probably what the Book of Enoch would be if there were one. And if there's not, this is the closest thing we have to it. It's from his time frame. Exactly. He was born 3300 BC. And there you go. That's my take on the Book of Enoch. I hope you watched it all. If you stuck with it, thanks for your time. I will see you later. Take it easy.